In this section, we are going to talk about your logs, log forms, and log events. First, what is the log form? The log form is the who and the what. Its purpose is to give details of what freight is being shipped, who moved it, and what did they move it with. Here are the sections that every log must have in order to be compliant with the FMCSA rules and regulations. We will start on the left side of this blank form, and we will walk through it together. First, you see the driver section. This notates whose log this belongs to. Next is the vehicle or unit field. This notates what unit number the driver was operating. Then we have the distance line. This breaks down how many miles were driven on the specific log. And finally, we have the shipping document section. This is what references what items were shipped. The number or numbers that go here help identify which bill of ladings were moved on this specific log. Now, as we jump over to the right side of this section, we see co-driver. This line here tells us if there was another driver in the truck, and if so, who that driver was. This is especially important because if you are stopped by a DOT officer and there is no co-driver listed on your log, they might get concerned that you are letting this person ride without permission from the company, or they could try to make even worse assumptions that you are assisting this person in some sort of illegal activity. Below the co-driver's line, we have assets. Here is where the log shows what trailers were transported on this specific log. Every company notates this slightly differently. Because we do not use our own trailers, we have created specific assets for Amazon in our system. All of our Amazon assets start with the letters AT and are followed by our unit numbers. So if you are operating Unit 133, then you would select asset AT-133. And finally, we have the log events section. This section here tells us the different events for the day. This is the when and where section. Here's where the timeline of the events, descriptions of the events, and location where they happened are notated. Let's go ahead and take a look at some sample logs. Let's take a look at the log form first. Everything in this left section looks good. There is a vehicle selected, and we know that the vehicle was connected properly because the distance was calculated within Motive and inserted into the log automatically. This driver also correctly put the correct load ID from their Amazon Relay app into the shipping documents section. Make sure you do not use the trip ID, but you are using the load ID. The trip ID inside will always start with the letter T, where your load ID will not have any prefix or letters in front of it, and there can be times when you will have multiple load IDs on the same log. Let's take a look at an example. Inside of Amazon Relay, we have identified our trip ID. We know this is the trip ID because it has a T prefix. And right here, we can see all of our load IDs. Now, let's walk through knowing when to add a load ID to our shipping documents. Let's say that you are getting ready to start your day and you need to add your first shipping document. You open your Relay app and see that you are taking over in the middle of this load. So this is going to be our load ID that we type into the shipping documents section inside our Motive app. Now, we have arrived to ABE 8 and dropped our trailer off, and our app has updated with the next load ID. We need to update our log form with the next load ID to make sure that we stay compliant with the FMCSA log rules. Let's go back into our Motive app and add the next load ID to the shipping documents section. From our Motive home screen, we click on the blue logs button first. Then we click on today's graph. Once there, we click on form at the top of the screen and then click on the shipping documents section. Type in the new load ID. Make sure you do not erase the first load ID. We don't want to erase the first load ID because that load was a part of today's runs. The point behind the shipping documents section is to notate on your logs what loads you have ran in your shift. If you erase the first load ID, then it only looks like you made the run from ABE 8 to CLT 4. The log doesn't indicate that you also made the run from HEW 9 to ABE 8. So now let's say you completed the next load ID as well. You will have a total of 3 load IDs in your shipping documents for that day. Now let's get back to the sample log we were looking at. On the right side of the log form, the driver is missing a listed co-driver. You must have a co-driver listed at all times when you're running a team run. Under the Assets section, you can see that the driver selected the correct asset because its asset ID matches the truck number they were in. We always want to select the asset that matches our truck number. Now let's take a look at the log events. The first thing we notice here is that the driver is not putting any notes into their logs. This is never acceptable. Every time you change from one duty status to another, you must type out a note. The reason this is so important is that your movements can't be followed by your dispatcher or by an officer. This leaves the opportunity for assumption, and nothing ever good comes from letting a DOT officer assume something. No one can understand why you were on duty for 12 minutes, then drove for 7 minutes, then were on duty again for 8 minutes, and then drove again for another 9 minutes. Yes, that's as difficult to follow by looking at it as it is by hearing it. Notes are very important to a log, so make sure every time you change your duty status, you insert a note that is followable. We will see some examples on the next log sample. Let's take a look at this log event right here. We can only assume that this driver arrived at a facility because then went from driving to on duty. If we are correct, then the driver should have changed their duty status to on duty yard move. We can take another assumption that the driver started moving around the yard because the truck detected an auto drive here. If the driver would have been on on-duty yard move, then when the driver moves the truck, it will not automatically switch it. This is important as well because we do not want to be wasting our drive hours moving around a yard. It would have also gotten rid of the next two log events because the driver wouldn't have had to go to on-duty again after moving the truck, and it would not have detected the next time they moved the vehicle either. Now let's move over and take a look at what an excellent log looks like. Let's start on the left side of the log form. As you can see, the truck was connected correctly because the miles were auto-populated into the log form. The shipping documents are also correct. The driver inserted the load ID and did not insert the trip ID from their Amazon app. On the right side of the form, you can see that the driver listed their co-driver and that they have selected the correct asset ID. This driver did a great job on their log forms. Now let's go see how they did on their log events. This driver did excellent with their notes. You can tell exactly why they changed their duty status and what they were doing it for. We can see here that the driver went from driving to on duty because they were waiting for their load at SLC1 and then they started driving again, and now they are heading to DEN4. We can later see that on the way to DEN4, the driver swapped with their co-driver. We see that they went on duty for their post-trip inspection. They ended their shift and then went into sleeper berth for their break. This log is an excellent log because not only are all the proper log forms entered correctly, but you can clearly follow the events of the day. This concludes Chapter 2. Get ready to answer some summary questions.